You gotta be kidding me. Alright, folks, Santino Pino here, Bureau of Prisons employees. Bureau of Prisons back in the headlines. Bureau of Prison employees used badges to improperly obtain firearms for personal use, watchdog fines. Let's jump into this article. Okay, let's just start reading. U.S. Federal Bureau of Prisons employees used their work credentials to buy guns for personal use, even when not authorized to carry a firearm at work, according to the Watchdog report released this week. The U.S. DOJ OIG notified the Bureau of Prisons of its concerns on 27th of May following an investigation into its policy to provide nearly all its employees with badges and law enforcement or law enforcement officer credentials. Some employees then, in violation of other BOP policies, use those same credentials to purchase firearms for personal use, sometimes bypassing requirements to obtain local permits. In some instances, employees tried to take advantage of their badges and credentials. A few of those employees were criminally prosecuted because they showed their BOP credentials or badges to law enforcement during traffic stops to evade apprehension for other crimes. Other individuals used their BOP credentials to obtain firearms that they otherwise would not have been able to purchase. And I'm just going to highlight purchase. I'm just going to put a highlight right here to mark so I can come back to it. But I see stories like this, and again, I worked in the prison system. I worked at the Bureau of Prisons and other prison systems for 14 years, and I've seen this. Like when I read this article, I remember of an almost humorous one I had at a federal prison that I worked at, where we had an incident that an officer tried to use his federal credentials to get like a discount on a TV because he had missed a sale, and he tried to say that he was on like some government operation, right? Like I just remember these things, and it's just like, I've never understood why, and I don't want to know why. I don't want to hear a justification, but I see just a small percentage of people that use their credentials for improper things. Now, there is another side to that teeter-totter, okay? So the thing that I want you to see is that, how do I put this? Is that your badge per se is not always the reason or the excuse you're using to purchase a firearm or an item, but in regards to there is a law out there called LEOSA, LEOSA, and it has to do with law enforcement officers carrying firearms. Okay, so when you have LEOSA, when you are a law enforcement officer, you are allowed by law in some places to bypass certain things. They are not using their per se BOP credentials to do so. They are just identifying that they are a law enforcement officer. And so it is a happy balancing act there as we move down. However, I mean, if you're purchasing firearms that you couldn't unless you were using your BOP credentials to do so, right? So there is not a black or white on this. There are different gradients. There's a spectrum here of how these credentials can be used, and we're probably going to read some highlights on that right now. Okay, in one case, a BOP employee who was not certified to carry a firearm purchased a pistol using BOP law enforcement credentials. The employee successfully bought the gun just over a year after the results of the National Instant Criminal Background Check System check denied an earlier attempt to buy a firearm. So, yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of detail in what really happened here or transpired. The only thing that I will catch here that I will give a factoid is, like, how can a BOP employee not be certified to carry a firearm? In that example, and this is not a secret, is that BOP employees can come on to the workplace, become officers, and take a post, and they can operate in the capacity of any post until they go to the federal academy, to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. So that's where they get certified to use firearms. So it depends when those next academies are. We're not going to make I said we again, but the Bureau of Prisons is not going to make officers or potential officers sit at home for 8, 9, 10 months waiting for an academy. They're going to put them to work into the types of posts that they can man without going to the academy, and most of those that they cannot operate until they go to the academy are any type of armed post. So you have to be really in just a contact post. You have to be in a post inside of the prison working with inmates. So yes, there can be BOP employees that are not certified to carry a firearm. However, as far as I know, unless this has changed, all BOP employees are required to go through the Federal Law Enforcement Training Academy, Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, the BOP program, to be an actual certified correctional worker. The only ones that I remember being allowed to opt out of the firearms training were medical staff and religious staff. But everybody else, even the accountants, the HR people, everyone, teachers, had to certify on firearms. Although, okay, let's continue. Okay, although BOP policy, keep the commercial off the screen, although BOP policy did not permit these employees to use their credentials to purchase firearms, the fact that the BOP issued them the credentials with law enforcement markings and no additional markings to indicate whether the employees are authorized to carry a firearm facilitated the purchases and impaired prosecution. Okay, now that to me, this right here is kind of a ridiculous thing to say. That it really is. Okay, we need you to pretty much double up on the printing. No, see, this person knew what they were doing is wrong. See, that's the problem. If you have one person that has an intention of committing a crime or doing something outside of the scope of what they're doing, if they intend on doing wrong, okay, they're going to find a way to do it. Okay, you cannot really blame the BOP for this at all, right? This is one person that decided, I'm going to go buy something illegally or buy something that I shouldn't, and I found a way to do it. I found, per se, in this case, they found a store, okay, credential purchase firearms, okay. They found a firearms shop that they knew they could get away with it. So this is, I have no problem saying that's on the shop, okay. That's on the shop because this person made an active decision to commit this crime. That cannot fall back on the Bureau of Prisons. As soon as that person made that decision, they are outside of the scope of the Bureau of Prisons. So that doesn't mean there needs to be fallback on the Bureau of Prisons for their actions. Okay, continuing on. The watchdog also added that BOP's policies on credential markings and use lack clarity, which enhances the risk that employees will misuse the credentials and badges to purchase firearms in violation of U.S. state laws. And okay, this is now just getting into gaslighting. Again, every single job has its kind of wacky people that do stupid stuff, and every job is going to have people that need to be swept up. There's always going to have people that make it through the cracks no matter what that job is. I mean, you know, both sides of politics will say that happened in the last few presidents, right? Like, no matter what, there's going to be people that fall through the cracks that shouldn't get a job. But it happens, and so then you cannot, again, if this person has made an active decision they are purposefully acting outside of the scope of their duties, outside of the scope of what they're allowed to do, there doesn't need to be a fallback against the BOP for that. This idea of crazy accountability for absolutely everything and everyone that could have been involved, that could have prevented something from going wrong, is just ridiculous. Okay, there's diminishing returns on the blame game. All right. The bottom line is there's one person here that said, I'm going to use my credentials illegally. That's the only problem. So credentials with law enforcement markings and badges generally signify that the holder is a qualified law enforcement authorized by their agency to carry a firearm, and that the holder has regularly qualified in the use of firearms, the OIG said in the memo that accompanied the report. I mean, yeah, this is true, but you see what happens generally. Okay, they're already acknowledging Okay, already acknowledging that it's not all credentials signify that. Okay, so that negates their point right there. They know that not all credentials from law enforcement signify that the holder is qualified to carry a firearm. So it's like they defeat their own argument with one word. All right, continuing on. The BOP did not respond to security management's request. Why would they? Okay. For comment on this article, but in March 2023 interview with the OIG referenced the investigatory report. A BOP official said that issuing all employees badges was an effort to bring a spirit de corps to build morale of the workplace. Oh my God. Okay, I mean, obviously they had to go back a few years to dig this thing up, right? Okay, that is probably whoever said that, I'm not going to look it up. Whoever said that probably regrets saying that. Obviously, we're not issuing the BOP is not issuing badges to help morale. It's because you are law enforcement officers. And so whoever said that they found the only out of context quote that they could possibly associate with this article and posted it. That is hilarious. All right, continuing on. The policy is problematic, however, because badges are distributed to employees who have not been trained or authorized to carry firearms at work, such as... Okay, let me just pause for a second. Let me pause right here on the chaplain, because we need the Lord right now, okay? The problem is fine. Again, they're using one example of one person that made a decision to use their credentials in a way that they should not have been used outside of the scope of the Bureau of Prisons. And now we see this tidal wave of let's get everybody, right? I dislike when either side of politics, either side of views, whatever you want to say, I dislike it when the blame game, it turns into a nuclear bomb. All right? It is absolutely ridiculous and inappropriate. I'm going to continue the article. We're going to get through it. It is a long article, but we'll get through it. In fact, I'm just going to go into first sentence mode here because we're seeing a quality shift in this article. The OIG recommended that the BOP update its policies and training to clarify appropriate and prohibited use of employee credentials. See, that right there is the appropriate. See, that's the appropriate response, is a recommendation to improve training. Okay, that put it back onto the staff so that they know and acknowledge that they can't use them. Right? I mean, I had a government credit card, and again, just highlighting to mark where I'm at, but I had a government credit card, and many Bureau of Prisons employees at the same time did. Okay, we all had different credit cards for different reasons that were given to us, and literally when they were handed to us by whoever handed them to us. Like, I had a credit card in my name that I could charge to the Bureau of Prisons. But we were also literally told, never use this. Like, you could not even think about touching that card and using it in any way, shape, or form unless you had pre-authorization to do so. Okay, you literally needed a memo signed by a warden saying this person is allowed to spend this, and then you had to return with receipts in order for that bill to be paid. And I would still, with all of the warnings we get of inappropriate use of government credit cards, I have watched executives go to a casino, max it out, and lose their career overnight. Okay? Just some people are going to go out, quote unquote, no offense by this quote, but it's a quote that many of you will understand, but off reservation, right? Because they're just they're getting away from the team, they're getting away from policy and procedures, they're getting away from everything, okay? From what they're supposed to do and doing their own thing. And so that recommendation is correct, improve training, but you're still going to have people that make those mistakes. Again, that's why I use the credit card as an example, is that literally any time that word credit card was said in the Bureau of Prisons, you were told never to use your government credit card for anything unless you have express written permission. Okay, and people still did it. So people are still going to do it even if they're educated not to. Okay, and that's just them making an active decision because they're willing to be criminals themselves. The BOP agreed to clarify its policies and training for employees on the use of credentials but it pushed back on some of those recommendations. BOP Director Marshall wrote in his response to OIG's findings that limiting law enforcement officers' credentials signifying employees' law enforcement officer status to only employee authorized to carry conflicts, legal definitions. I mean, yeah, and on top of it, it's just cumbersome to do something like that, to require multiple different layers of IDs and stuff like that. It's like there's already enough going on there. And the other part too, when it comes to most law enforcement credentials now, is that there's kind of the lazy system, is that you have a generalized law enforcement credential for your agency that doesn't really have title or anything. It just shows authorized, or shows a very generalized law enforcement term, because it might be the only ID you have, right? No, they don't even many agencies don't even do new IDs when you get promoted. Okay, you just have your one general ID now. So yes, like there's no need to have all these different layers of IDs. And then on top of that, if you have all these different types of IDs that staff need to carry, there's even more possibility of some of those IDs being lost and altered and ending up in inmates' hands. Like there's just so many reasons that this is a bad idea. And the only reason why it's a good idea is because one staff member did their own thing illegally. Okay, so so it's like if you had a choice, would you just rather punish the person that did it or punish everybody else? And this article is trying to say punish everyone else. It's the officer that committed the crime is the victim, is what they're really trying to say. Okay, this would also be a financial issue of staffing and the cost of credentials again. And they keep, I mean, you can't put more bills, you can't put more cost on the Bureau of Prisons when Congress keeps cutting their budget. The OIG explained in its investigatory report that it was aware of the logistical and financial challenges that changing BOP policy on credentials could have. I have to read the but. I knew there was going to be a but. But changing the policy, BOP would be addressing the significant risk associated with issuing law enforcement officer credentials to employees who are generally unqualified to carry a firearm. Like again, just you defeated your argument per se in this article with the first sentence. Okay. The nature of those significant risks are evidence in those examples provided by OIG's memorandum. There's two examples and a 3-year-old quote. Moving on. The OIG also added that the current BOP policies and broad issuance of law enforcement officer credentials to its personnel makes it difficult to hold employees accountable when they purchase firearms illegally. It's a large law enforcement agency. They're all law enforcement officers. Like it's just complaining to complain at this point. All right, I'm going to finish the article. I almost want to tell you, hey, you can move on to the next video if you want, but maybe it'll be something funny in it, right? The OIG made this recommendation because we consider the risks of the police who are unqualified. BOP employees getting firearms is nowhere near the greatest security risk that needs to be addressed right now in regards to firearms. Let's just put it that way. We need to stop mentally ill people from purchasing firearms. Okay? That needs to stop right now before we can get to law enforcement officers not being able to purchase their own firearms. Okay. OIG's findings were released during a moment when the BOP is experiencing a staffing crisis. In March 2026, Security Management identified the BOP as approximately 11,800 correction officers on staff, down from a peak of 20,000 in the mid-2010s. The staffing challenges have led BOP to lean heavily on a policy called augmentation, where non-correctional staff, and I'm just going to say this, I've said it in multiple articles, and I just want to say it again so it gets caught, all right? Bureau of Prisons, I'm telling you right now, okay, from an outside perspective of someone that used to work at the Bureau of Prisons, okay? The reason you can't fully staff is augmentation. You need to delete that button. As long as you can push the augmentation button, you will never be able to fill your posts. And I'm not even going to explain it anymore. Maybe you just need to take my trust on credit, okay? Is in the fact that I am telling you right now, as long as you can augment, you will never be fully staffed. If you want to be fully staffed and bring that core culture back to the Bureau of Prisons, you need to delete that augmentation button. And on that note, I'm going to ask you to subscribe, please. Like the video, share it. Again, my name is Santino Pino. Usually my name and number flash at the end of the screen, but that's not going to happen in this video today because of quick editing. But if you ever have any TSP questions, find my contact information here on my YouTube page. Give me a call and we can have a discussion. Thank you for checking this video out. Again, like, subscribe, that all helps the algorithm, and share this video with people that need to see it. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.